we'll create a named constructor. So it will be called bookmark from map. So this named constructor will receive a map object. And then once it receives it in the initializer for this named constructor, we'll invoke this constructor and pass it the details from the map. So if I do this, and then our title, we'll take the title from the bookmark, and we'll do the same for description, and then we'll do that for our URL. And then for edit mode, we will grab the edit flag from our bookmark if it exists, or we'll set it to false. And then we'll do the same for it's fresh, we'll set that to false as well. So we can save this, and then we will come back to our bookmark service and get rid of all of this and do bookmark from map, and then we'll pass in our details. So let's save this and reload, and yep, it still works for us. Okay, so what happens when we click edit? Yeah, everything should still work okay. So it shows .dev at the bottom left. Okay, so let's amend our bookmark object to receive this key from our Firebase database. So this key is essentially a unique identifier for each item in our collection. So if I come back to our database, it's going to be this value over here. So what I'll do is augment details, now create an ID, and I'll assign key as the value, which means that we need to come back to our bookmark model and have a definition for ID, and then in here we will extract ID from our bookmark, and we need to define this here as well. And actually I'll just do that, so by default it will be set to null. Okay, so let's save that. Now that we've added an ID to our bookmark model, and we're able to use it a bit later on when it comes to updating our bookmarks. But for now, what we're going to do is amend our bookmark service, specifically adding a method to add a bookmark to our database. So I'll come in here, and then this method returns a future, and then this method, we call it add bookmark, which will take in a bookmark object. We mark it as async, and then what we want to do is create a variable called res for results, and then I will call the push method on our database reference, which in here will take in our bookmark. This push method, we're feeding it a map object, so essentially we need to deconstruct this bookmark and then put the details in here. We'll let this be handled by our model. So let's come back to our model quickly, and then right before the update method, we create a new method called asMap, which returns a map object containing the details of our bookmark. Okay, once that's done, then we'll come back here, then we'll do bm as map, which will give us a map object. So now we can add a new entry to our database. So let's save this, and then we will come back to our scaffold component. We need to create a new method to handle pushing newly created bookmarks to our database. So we'll call this method update bookmark. This update bookmark takes in an index on our bookmark. We'll mark it as async, and then we'll start by capturing a reference to our bookmark. And then what we're going to do is we're going to await on our bookmark service, and then we'll call the add bookmark method, and then we'll pass it this bookmark we added. So let's save this and give that a go. And of course we can't give that a go straight away because we need a way to invoke this update bookmark method in our template. The way we'll invoke that is through our form. So if you watched the previous videos, I did mention that we're able to emit custom events from our components. So essentially we need to create another custom event. So if we come to our BM form, in here we'll create another custom event which is based on streams. So we'll create a stream controller called form update control, and then we'll have our getter or our form update, and then it will be form update control stream. And of course we need to annotate it with the output annotation, and the name of our custom attribute will be on update. And then should our bookmark be valid, we'll emit our event by calling the add method on our stream controller, and then we just pass it null. So I'll save this, and then we'll come back here, define on update, and then we'll call update bookmark while passing a reference to our index, which is this function here. So let's save all our files and give this a go. So I'll click to add a new bookmark. Let's add a Dart lang. Click on update, and then if we come back to our Firebase database, we should see here that we have a new entry, which is the bookmark we just added. Okay, so that's working. With each entry that gets added, a unique identifier gets generated. So we need to essentially assign that somewhere. What we'll do is we will come back to our bookmark service, and then in our add bookmark method, res returns what's known as a deleble reference, and therefore we can do return res, which has a key. So this key property returns that unique identifier which was created. So I'll do that, save that, and then I'll come back to our BM scaffold component, and then what we want to do is store the key that gets returned on the variable called res ID, so result ID or whatever you want to call it. And then what we'll do is we'll amend the ID of our bookmark to the result ID. So this is useful because if you remember from our previous video, when adding a bookmark, we hide the cancel button due to a property we created on our bookmark object called isFresh. So because now we're doing it based on IDs, we can hide the cancel button if an ID is not defined. So if there's no ID, that means we're not editing something that's already added to our database. If there's not an ID, then we're creating a new item, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. So I will come back to our template here, and then BM form component, and then in here we need to replace all instances of isFresh, which is just one of them, fortunately, and we want to check that our bookmarks ID is not null. So if it's not null, that means it's already been created and we're performing an edit operation, else it will be null. So let's save this and check it in the browser. So if I click on add bookmark, you don't see the cancel button here because ID is null. If I click edit here, we see the cancel button because ID is defined. Okay, so that means we can now come back to bookmark.dart and get rid of this, which I didn't like anyway. So let's code. There we go. And this flags up now. We need to clean it up here. Okay, let's save all our files. Check our console, it's okay. Okay. So this gets loaded, click add a bookmark, we don't see the cancel button. I click edit, we see cancel button. Let's try and make amends, and let's click update, and then of course our updates are made, but then it's not updating our database. It is updating our database. Well, it's not updating our database actually, it's adding a new entry because it's got the same details as this one. So what we need to do is to make it essentially update any previous entries that exist. So let's delete this one actually, and then I'll come back here to our service and we'll define a method called update bookmark, and we mark this as async. And what we'll do is we just need to return, and we'll do an await, and we'll get our database reference, and then we'll reference a child item in there, which will be the ID from our bookmark. So that's how we're able to identify the child item. So update bookmark will take in our bookmark, and then we'll extract the ID from that, and then we're going to call the set method, and then that will allow us to set the new values. So it will be bm the updated bookmark, and then as map. So when I save this, make sure all files are saved, and let's edit this, get rid of that, click on update, come back to our Firebase data store, and of course still as a new one. Sorry, I realized that we need to do one more thing in our scaffold component file here, because whenever we click update, we are calling add bookmark, we're not calling update bookmark. So what we need to do in here now kind of makes sense while I called it update bookmark instead of create or add. So I'll do if our ID for our bookmark is null, then that means we're adding a new bookmark. So we'll do this one. Else if it's not null, that means we've added it already, and therefore what we wish to do is to update our bookmark. So let's save this, and let me get rid of this. Well, actually that won't make any difference. Let me come back here and delete this one, and then come back here and let's edit it again. Update. Okay, let's come back to our database, and yeah, so it's updated the exact item we wanted to update. So let's test it again. We'll change .com to .dev, click update, and then we'll come here, and yeah, we see it's updated to .dev. All right, cool. Now what we need to do is to add the ability to delete a bookmark from the database. So what we'll do is we'll come back to our service, and then we'll create a method, I'll call it remove bookmark, which will give it a bookmark object, mark it as async, and in here we want to return awaiting our database reference, then we'll reference that child, and then we'll call the remove method, and that should be it from the services point of view. And then we'll come back to our scaffold component, and then in remove bookmark we will essentially mark this as async, and then we'll await now BM services removal of the bookmark. So I'll just do bookmarks in our index. So let's save that and give that a go. Okay, edit, delete. Okay, so let's see what happens in our database, and nothing deleted. Let's see if there's any errors. No errors in the console. So let's see if there's any errors in the terminal. No errors in our terminal. Okay, let's check and see what happens when we click on delete. So on delete Yeah, we're doing it right. We're calling remove bookmark, the remove bookmark method. So this should be right. Let's reload and try again. So we'll do edit, and then we'll invoke delete. Okay, it's deleting here, but it's not removing from the database. Okay, so I did some debugging, and you wouldn't believe what the issue actually was. But let me show you before I get to the root of the issue, let me show you what's happening. So when we click on edit and we click on delete, I added some login statements here. You can see that it calls the remove bookmark, right, and it prints out the ID, but then it invokes this one as well, updating bookmark. So it invokes this as well as that, which brings me to the form itself. And the reason why it invokes updating bookmark is because of this method here being invoked, right? So then it invokes update bookmark, and of course it re-adds the entry in there. But the reason why this form submit event is being triggered is essentially how HTML works. HTML button elements in forms work, because by default, if you place a HTML button in a form element, the type is set to submit. So to mitigate that, you want to set the type to button, and then we'll do the same for this cancel button, and I'll make sure that all my files are saved, no errors in the console. I just reloaded the page again. Okay, so if I do edit and I click on delete, it should just show delete. Okay, so it just logs out the ID, it's not logging out our update bookmark operation. So when we come to Firebase, it's gone. So that's what the root issue was. HTML, always add type buttons to buttons put inside forms if the purpose is not to submit information. All right, so I'm gonna come to my bookmark service and get rid of all this jazz, and there we go. Oh wait, I need to come back here and get rid of this ID. Okay, so let's test the full flow. I'm going to add a bookmark. You should not see the cancel button here. When I click edit, I'm able to see the cancel here. That's fine. So I'll add one and another bookmark. So go to resource blog for tutorials. There. Okay, it's added it there. You should see that new entry added here. And then I'm going to make an update. So I'll go to Dart resource blog and I'll click on update, and then it updates the actual item rather than creating a new one. And then we will delete. Okay, then when we come to Firebase, the entry is now removed. So if I refresh, we should just see one item from the database. Okay, cool. And yeah, of course, I mean, if I click cancel, that does that. All right, so just to recap what we did, I won't go over everything, but essentially we created our bookmark service, which is responsible for interacting with our Firebase database. We are using the Firebase package, which is a wrapper over the JS API. So we installed it by updating our dependencies in our pubspec.yaml, and then you can run pubget to update your packages. And then we grabbed the Firebase script as well, and we placed it in our index.html file before our main.dart file. So now at this point, Firebase is available on the page. And then if we come back to our service, we called our initialize app method, from the Firebase package, and then we use the authentication details from our Firebase console. And then from there, we grab the reference to our database. And then from our database reference, we grabbed a reference to our collection, which is bookmarks, which meant that we were able to perform all these operations on there. So CRUD operations essentially. All right, so this brings us to the end of the video, and I hope it was informative and you learned something different today. Do consider subscribing and hit the bell notification icon to be updated when new content is released. Thank you.